watching The Producer's Room, a streaming web series featuring the creators behind the hit songs of today's music industry. Songwriters, music producers, and artists discuss their creative process as well as examining current issues and technologies in today's rapidly changing music business. Your host is producer, songwriter, and educator Dave Tuff. Welcome to The Producer's Room. Welcome to this episode of The Producer's Room. I'm your host, Dave Tuff, and once again, we're coming to you from the historic House of David Studios here on Music Row in lovely Nashville, Tennessee. At least it's lovely today. It's 75 degrees out, and I'm really excited about our guest today. Let me tell you a little bit about him. Anthony Smith is a versatile songwriter and producer and arranger here in Nashville. He's had several top 10 hits. And really, What About Now? Was that a number one? Lonestar? I can't remember. Yeah, Lonestar number one with What About Now? Tomorrow by Chris Young, which was a CSAC Song of the Year in 2011. And just a lot more artists that I'll just name real quick. Bucky Covington. He's written songs for Donna Summer, Clay Walker, Neal McCoy, Dee Messina, and the list goes on and on. So without further ado, we'll get into it. Welcome, Mr. Anthony Smith. Thanks for being here on The Producer's Room.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And we talked about Nashville. We actually talked about you working in the studio here, House of David, historic House of David. What's your history? Let's start there. What's your history with House of David?
Well, my first venture in here was years ago when I first moved to town, and I had this project with a friend of mine, Mike Curtis, and my publisher at the time, Bob Beckham. I was the keyboard guy, had done all the keyboard programming and everything, and he says, I think you ought to go and play this for my friend David Briggs. So he had me, made an appointment. I came and played it for David. David really liked it enough to where we were trying to get cheap studio time, and he actually gave me the studio to do it in.
Oh, nice.
And that was just a really great experience to do it, and we hooked up the project, and it got off the ground, and it was great. But that was the first time really meeting David and having fun and talking to him. And then recently, I worked in here within the last month.
Okay.
After they've reopened it and revamped it. And
did you enjoy it? I assume you enjoyed it with all this nice equipment and
it's been fantastic. And the fun thing is, all the people that I've been talking to that have been hearing the mixes and everything that worked on it, from Soundstage and Black River, they've all been loving it and asking questions about it and coming over. And I was talking to a couple of buddies of mine today. I was riding with Carson Chamberlain and a new artist he's working with, and he's produced Billy Currington and Easton Corbin and different things. And I was telling him about the studio, and he had worked in here years ago and didn't know it was back open. So a lot of people are getting the word that it's back open, and it was a great experience this last time.
Now, are you, on this particular session you were in here, were you writing, producing both? I guess it leads into my question, what are you, nowadays, are you writing more, producing more? Because I saw you were producing a lot of artists as well.
Yeah, I usually starts out from the writing point of view, and if it leads to where I'm developing somebody, I will produce them, or sometimes I'm brought in as a producer. But I'm constantly writing with different artist friends that we're doing stuff. It could be from Low Cash now to a song I just got recorded with Parmalee, to Kanan Smith, to Own and Own, more Chris Young stuff, whatever. I mean, I'm constantly writing with artists that are on labels, and some that we may be developing or somebody else may be developing. But a lot of that happens these days. You do a lot more writing with the artist than you used to do. Right. So it just depends on which way it is and how how it goes.
I like that. I like this because we're starting right now and what you're up to right now. So are you known for anything in town? I mean, as far as people say, we're going to call Anthony because he's got this one thing that he really, as far as your particular style and these co-writes, or do you wear a lot of hats? Are you writing lyrics, you're writing the music?
I do wear a lot of hats, but what I get called for a lot of times is because I've had a background that's been in country and in dance and R&B stuff that really tends to lend an edge. And a lot of people will call me for that reason. Yeah. That they'll think that if it's a real, like the thing I worked on today was with a really traditional artist, but he needed to be in what's going on today.
Right.
Even though he may have a voice like
Sure.
a Keith Whitley or somebody like
Yeah.
that, but you got to do tracks like what's going on today. So a lot of times it'll be to bring that to the table. People just like that element
That's
of
cool.
having different things and that you do. And like tomorrow I'm working with another artist on Curb Records and a female and Rachel Holder, and the same thing, trying to add that. And then on Monday I have a guy over here, a pop writer from London, that we're going to be working for a couple of days. So it depends, but you do have other things that you bring that you just throw in the mix that people tend to like. You know?
Sure. Well, let's take a step back. So before you even got to House of David, you had to come to Nashville, right? So
Yeah.
where are you from originally, and how did you end up in Nashville?
I'm from Birmingham, Alabama originally, actually.
All right. So just like, straight south, and then you just drive straight
south there, and
Yeah.
I wound up when I was, in college or about to get out, and a friend and I had written songs, and we thought we would get songs, try to have something done with them, and I ended up, we made trips to Muscle Shoals at the time. That was the first stop. Things were going on. And, didn't really get very far there.
So you had ventured out to be a songwriter to begin with.
Yeah,
or performer.
I really actually didn't even know. I was really getting money, trying to, as they said in those days, to sell songs.
Right.
To get money, because I was headed to graduate school at Eastman School of Music.
Oh, nice.
And
keyboard's your main instrument, sounds like, right? Is it
my main instrument at the time? It's actually trumpet.
Trumpet. Oh.
I was a jazz trumpet player.
Wow.
And my goal was to be a jazz trumpet player in a big band.
Wow.
And I just wrote songs to relax.
Interesting.
I never really thought thought
cool.
about being a professional songwriter. I didn't actually know people did that much,
Yeah.
So when I was practicing trumpet all the time, you'd practice pretty much 2 to 4 hours a day as a guy, a couple in the morning, a couple in the evening. But you had to do these breaks in between. You can only play so long, then you got to stop so you don't damage the muscles.
Yeah.
And when I would do that, I would just sit at the piano, and because I was I was also a composition and arranging major. Trumpet was my main instrument, so you write a lot of stuff from the piano.
Sure.
So I'd always sit down and I'd write things, but when we got to the point we could make up things, and just make up songs just to relax.
That's cool.
That's how I kind of ended up getting into it.
It's always interesting to see people's paths, how it leads to it. That's great.
Yeah.
And so you guys got up there, you're trying to sell some songs there, sell songs like you said, and then did that eventually lead up to Nashville? And then were you into country, coming from the jazz background, I guess? Those are all questions that...
Yeah, it was an interesting story. We went and we couldn't get anywhere, and about 1:30 in the afternoon, my friend and I were licking our wounds because everybody turned us down.
Yeah.
So I decided to try something different. There was Muscle Shoals, Sound, and Fame, all these famous studios, and so I had a fedora hat in the car from something, and I put it on, and I put on some dark sunglasses, and I went to the studio, and I told them I was an arranger from the West Coast, because I figured if they gave me something, it'd be so simple. And I told them that, and they just buzzed me right in.
Wow.
And they gave me this guy's name who was doing all the arrangements for all the records at the time. He was doing for all the records in Nashville. He was a famous guy named Harrison Calloway that did all those records. And I called him up, and he talked to me about, 10 minutes before he figured out I was a student, hadn't really done anything.
Right.
But he had me to send him things, and eventually they were actually doing a record for Monument Records, and I sent them a song that they recorded for that record, and that got me to town. I'd written it by myself, and I didn't have a publisher or anything. I didn't know anything about publishers, but I sent this song to them that they wanted to put on their record, and I own all the publishing, which I was way too glad to give to them at the time, and so that kind of got me into. That's how I ended up in Nashville.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so had you ever listened to country music before? I mean, I'm sure you heard some from Birmingham.
I did, and I, at the time, there was things out that I liked, but things that I didn't, but I didn't really even recognize that music had to be restricted to a certain genre at the time.
Right.
Because, like in a lot of different kinds of things, I thought you could just do I always did a bunch of different things.
Sure.
You know, play jazz trumpet,
Yeah.
play over here in an R&B band, write songs over here.
Yeah.
It never occurred to me that you had to do one thing.
Right. Well, it looks
So-
from your resume that you do
Yeah.
you do it all still. I mean, you're doing
Yeah.
country, you're doing pop, R&B,
Yeah,
jazz.
but when I got in,
Yeah.
my publisher, you know, I remember him telling me when I played songs for them, because they were doing a kind of a pop R&B album, and when I brought in songs, he said, you know, if you can learn how to do these country songs as well as you do those, I think you can make a living. And finally, you just put it together of, you know, you can write this kind of song and not this kind of song, whether it's whichever market it's for.
Right.
And you do this really well, and this you might not do as well
Sure.
as somebody else.
Sure.
So then that's when it sort of came together, and you sort of start working and realizing that from a business perspective, they had to be from one way or another.
Fit that
If
radio
you-
format or whatever it is.
what that
Yeah.
publisher was looking for,
Sure.
you had to be able to dial that in.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So tell me, because you've been writing, I mean, you've had hits in like 2 or 3 decades here as I'm looking at it. How do you keep up with, and now you're talking about writing with a lot of these modern artists, how do you keep up with the genre shifts? And I guess what genre shifts have you seen in country music? Like, I mean, have you seen rock integrated more nowadays, or the pop influencers? Has it always been that way? And I mean, you know, just in general, the changing landscape of being a songwriter for that long and surviving.
Well, you've seen a couple different kinds of things. You've seen to where you would put like major sevens or so
Yeah.
forth in songs,
Yeah.
which I was doing when I first got to town from the jazz side, which they
Right.
beat those all out of you.
Right.
And beat you down to never do that. And then all of a sudden, once you get to the point that you beat down, you're never doing that, other guys are learning how to do that.
Yep.
And they're bringing it back in, and you're doing it. And then we already went through the loop phase.
Yeah.
You
With the
know,
bro
in the
country
early
and all.
2000s,
Yeah.
we were doing it to the point to where every memo from every label said, don't send me anything else with a loop on it, to where it's back to loops, to where my last publisher goes, hey, man, you know, you used to do a lot of that. You probably should get you some more loops and get another setup. So I
So
revamped
just like
my,
all cyclical.
yeah,
Just
revamped my
kinda-
home studio and just rocking back into it. But, you know, it's always elements. It's always growing, and it's always fun to see. It's led by the artists.
Yeah.
You know, and what they grew up on. So you really have to get involved in what they're trying to do and help them do it the best that it can be done
Right.
for them. But it's all about the artist.
So speaking to that and more on the producer side, do you think there's a higher level of perfection with Pro Tools and all that nowadays? I mean, do you think things are getting too slick, or do you think that, I mean, that's just the way it is with the technology that we have, or, you know, I don't know. You just,
I think it's in how you use it.
right.
I think you can overuse all of it. I think you can overthink things and overuse all of it. But I also think, I mean, they're great tools. No question about it. You can start something in your home or basement which can have the quality to where if they just simply love the guitar and the vocal
Yeah.
on that can actually end up being a hit record.
Sure.
You can finish it up places. So that all is an
That's
advantage in the fact that everything, all these sounds are on board in your computer, that you just have this endless bank of
Yeah.
great stuff to choose from, which used to be not even affordable for a songwriter. You know, you couldn't just go do that. I think you have that, and I think that's great. I think if you take it and use it to the point to where you have a so-so singer, and you know,
Yeah.
try to make them better, or even if you have a great one and you just sift the soul right out of them, I think they can be overused.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and I think we can sometimes overthink it to the point of too perfect,
Right,
so to speak,
right.
to where there's no soul in it. There's
Yeah.
no.
And that's just a gut feeling when you know you've,
I think so. I think
Gone
it's
too
really
far.
to the people that are doing it, that they love it, and there are things, you know, string noises. There are things that should be in there. There are movements in that singer's voice that are the things that make them unique and wonderful,
Sure.
that you take out, and then it's no longer them.
Yeah.
It's just somebody singing this straight melody, and I think you can take all the character and all the personality out of them. And the main thing with an artist that that makes them great is when they have a personality in their voice, and you hear their voice and you see their face. That's when you become. That's when they become stars.
Wow.
When you
Like
hear
that.
their voice and you can see their face in your mind, you know who that is. Versus a record you just hear and you have no clue. That's what personality is.
Ooh, I like that.
And when it makes that transition, in order to do that, you have to be able to recognize and preserve those aspects
Sure.
in an artist and write towards them or produce a record towards that, because it's something that they have that's different from anything anybody else has.
Sure.
And it's what they're going to do better than anybody else,
Wow.
because it's part of them innately,
All right, guys, a lot of wisdom from Anthony Smith. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to the Producer's Room. Once again, we're here with Anthony Smith today. Thanks for joining us. And we were just talking about technology in the home studio, and the question kind of led me to thinking, well, if there's all this good stuff in the home studios, why are you still coming in and working on a console like this or in a studio like House of David? Obviously, there's still a need for a studio like this, right?
Well, yeah. A lot of times, the consoles, you're just using them for monitoring for the main thing.
Right.
But in your home studio, in this studio, I tracked 5 songs for that session of songs I've written with different people and artists or whatever. And then at the same time, I was finishing 4 songs in my home studio that were mostly programmed.
I gotcha.
And there's not the space for live guys, and it's not really even, they're not even that vibe for that many live guys. It's a lot more of a programmed sound with those kinds of tracks, and you can do the vocals either place. But we did, right after I finished the 5, I finished 4 more that were songs that didn't need the live treatment. They needed this kind of treatment to come to life.
Right.
And so some of them are more track-based.
Yeah.
And these days, what used to be really big in the 90s and the 2000s in L.A., when you would go out to New York or any place else, they had track people there that would do tracks, and you would top line and do it. That's moved into Nashville quite a bit now. And even a lot of times when you write something, if it's track-based, they'll take the track and maybe put live guys over that track if they do it, but really capture that feel and those stops and those spaces and some of the hip-hop kick drum patterns and stuff like that, to do it to sort of merge the two formats together. But that's really prominent with the bro country and a lot of things like that. That's really prominent now. So that's where you have the different needs. One, you need 5 or 6 musicians to interact, and they need the live treatment of that. And others, you need to sit around where you get these quirky little parts, and the song is built off whatever that quirky thing is that made it cool.
Right.
That's what make that song comes to life.
And so your guys are coming up with some of these signature parts when you're here with the band on top of that. Yeah.
If you do it like that, they're coming up with the signature parts, or they may not. You may just have a plain work tape where they're coming up with the signature parts. And if it's something that you finish and you do at home, you still go through the mixing process. Still go through the singer with put the background vocals and all that. But the signatures there are signatures that you guys wrote it to or started with, and it becomes that. And so that it's 2 different ways to get to 2 different means to an end to do different kinds of songs. And it behooves you to do both kinds. And with the cool thing about all the technology, all the loops and different things like that, it keeps us from, you were asking earlier about keeping things fresh and what people do, it keeps you from defaulting to what you normally would just do. Right. And instead of just going to this, playing keyboards and ended up with this ballad, you've got now these groups going on, which makes you write a different kind of song than you would normally write. Right. And it takes everybody out of that element and slips them over here to where the phrasing's different, things are different, and it makes them upgrade their game just by mixing those things in like that.
Sure. I want to go more into your songwriting creative process with loops and stuff, but real quick, one business question that you kind of alluded to there. You were talking about the top lining coming to Nashville, and the thing that always confused me in hip-hop was why the track guy got 50% and then the top liner got 50%, as far as melody and lyrics. Does it work that way in Nashville, or are splits kind of negotiable as far as when you're working with somebody that already has a pre-existing track and you're writing on top of it? How have you worked that out?
It pretty much works as a co-write.
Okay.
It just has pretty much worked as a co-write, because one of the things that the reason it was so prominent there is because they would sign these track guys because those guys became producers.
Right.
Would produce the label liked what they heard, they
Right.
produced the record. And by doing that, you were more insured to have the cut by doing it with them. So that was their value too. They were
Sure,
bringing in that.
sure.
Plus, they came in with a great track. Here has become some of our hottest new producers now are track guy writers.
Right, right.
And that's the same thing. They have written it, writing with the artist. The label likes what they heard.
Right.
And those guys ended up getting the gig to do the artist. And so your song became more valuable
Sure.
by working with them. And it has pretty much worked the very same way
Yeah.
here. If they really bring something to the
Sure.
table, not just somebody that noodles around with something
Yeah.
here and there and just kind of add it
It can't be
on.
just like a beat and some chords. It's
Yeah,
got to be
just
a
add it
huge
on.
vibe for
but
the
somebody
track.
that
Yeah.
really actually knows
Yeah.
what they're doing
Yeah.
and is great at it.
Yeah.
You know, can make a so-so. Same thing as what we were talking about, what we capture at the house, except it may even be better. They could just make, you just take something that would be sort of ordinary and put a great vibe to it. And that happens all the time, whether you capture that with live guys
Sure.
or with track things you're doing, but you just move the dial on what would be an ordinary song, and suddenly it sounds like a hit.
Sure.
You know?
That is cool. I mean, the loops do inspire you in different ways. So speaking of loops and inspiration, when you're sitting down to write, and maybe it's someone you've never written with before, do you have a particular process? Are you throwing out hooks first? Are you putting on a loop first for inspiration? Like what would you prefer to do in a co-write, or maybe have a conversation with someone to learn more about them? Do you have any particular techniques that you like to start out a co-write with?
Well, it depends on what they have. You know,
Yeah.
like today I had not written with this particular artist, and I'll just ask him. But I pretty much take out my laptop and my hard drive and some little speakers that I have and hook into the loops to have them ready to go.
Sure.
And if we throw out a title that we love and we get a feel, I might bring a loop to that feel.
Gotcha.
If they just like it, and I said, do we want to do beats first to go to that beat and then see what titles fit, what mood are we in? We just generally talk like that.
Gotcha.
And figure what mood you're in,
Yeah.
and we may wait on it. We might throw it out first to lead the way. Today we threw it out first, the loop to lead the way. Then
Melody, or lyrics, or both, or
and then we had through that out, and then we had several titles we were choosing from.
Okay.
To do that, and once we did that, once we threw it out, then just take your instrument, and then you just start freestyling melodies and chords and freestyling what we're feeling, and then get a vibe going of music and figure out if it fits this title, or if we're trying to choose 3 or 4 titles that people have. Somebody says which one, and typically if it's an artist, you might want to see what they want to write if they have a title, or if you have a great one. If they don't, you can bring one to the table. But a lot of times they will have ideas about what they want to do, and so you just get vibes going in a direction. Or if you already hear a title, it may inspire a piece of music, and you go at it this way. So it's a few different ways, but everything is sort of gun and man and ready to go. How do we hear that? And you figure out how you hear it, and sometimes the beat leads the way, and sometimes you lead the way and add the beat.
But it sounds like you're coming prepared to the co-write. You have some, I don't want to say tricks, but you have some stuff. You have the loops ready. You have some hooks just in case they don't have any, or titles.
Yeah.
You have some things that are going to inspire creativity.
Yeah, you have titles. You usually, hopefully, everybody will have some, and sometimes you end up just pulling one out of the air.
Yeah.
And you have tons of banks of different kinds of loops, so you could build one.
Right.
Anything, you have a lot of that going on, and you can, it's just all to bring into things that can inspire and heighten the process.
Sure.
And it's the same way when you were talking about when even before all that, or without in the live situation. Same thing as when you transition a written song and a work tape with these great musicians to something that sounds like a hit.
Yeah.
Either way, you just make it sound like, the more it sounds like a hit, the more it'll cut through all the stuff it needs to cut through. And when the powers that be hears it, the better chance it'll have at standing out and getting to the other side.
Sure.
You know, so that becomes your
Sure.
job, and you have to. You can do that in any one of those environments, but it kind of works the same way. You know, with these great guys that you take something and you come up with something, you hear something, magic, because they can do anything. You have to give them direction, lead the way of what it is. You know, they can do anything, and they're there to make you happy and please you, whatever you want. The more you can explain, and the faster you can talk the language and get on the page, you can do it. Or over here, you're creating the same little thing. So,
a couple more songwriting questions, and then I actually want to get into your creative process of some of these big hits that you've written. So, as far as the artist's vocal range, that's one thing I've always found interesting. If you're writing with an artist, let's say they're singing the melody, or you're singing the melody, but it's not something that's in their key. You know, at what point do you say, hey, we need to raise this? Is that after the song's done, or do you do that early on in the stage to say, to make this chorus more powerful, let's take it up a couple of steps? Or are you listening to their vocal range as you're writing with them, I guess?
I just did that with an artist Monday.
Yeah.
Well, and I did it, you know, we were finishing up something that we had started, you know, the first time we got together. And once we really defined the melody and sort of figured out what we really liked, we figured we would throw her on a microphone so that we could see if this is working in her range.
Yeah.
If all the low ends and the high ends are really working.
Yeah.
And we had to revamp the verse. The chorus was fantastic, but we had to revamp the verse just because it's one of those things, like you say, when you're not actually singing it and you're just messing around in the key, they all sound great. But when you start putting them into where this is in this register and this is in this register, and they turn out being 2 octaves apart or an octave and a half or something that's not really, you know, suitable, you have to change that if that's the case, or it may just right away be just fine. But you need to find that out before nailing it all down and proceeding and nailing all the lyric down. We've sort of written the chorus. We had the chorus, and we were dialing in the verse, and we had to figure out, we better figure this out, because there's nothing more disheartening than getting all that done and then figure out, man, this don't work, you know? And I've done that enough to where I try not to do that anymore as much, you know? If it's something you can't clearly tell, you need to get them to sing it, and a lot of times they'll do that just on their own, just singing so that you can just hear the landscape of it top to bottom, from a verse to a chorus, till you know where you have these bookends, and then everything else will work from there.
Now, one other question, since you do work in a lot of genres, at the point where you're coming up with the lyric to the melody, and we were talking about fitting those radio formats, or, you know, some divisions of what the publisher is looking for. How is a country lyric going to be different just for our audience than, let's say, a pop lyric or an R&B lyric? Are there any general trends in country music that you think, okay, you put on your hat, like, I'm writing a country song today lyrically? Is it more furniture? Is it more descriptive? Is it more...
Yeah, lyrically, country songs generally have more furniture and more images in them.
Okay.
They generally are, you know, because in our format, the vocals are a lot hotter. It's very lyric driven.
Right.
And even with the new phrasings and all things, it's still very lyrical, very lyric driven. And in a pop and R&B or a dance format, it may be a lot more melodically driven, and you can get away with repeating 1 or 2 words with the coolness about them that people are dancing to that actually works, you know? And too much of what we do over there just don't work. It just bogs the song down, you know? It's just a different listener, and they get away with a lot more feel than a lot more of that. And so over here, the lyric tends to definitely lead the way.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We'll be right back with Anthony Smith. We'll see you guys in just a second.
What would a degree from Belmont University mean to you?
I'm so proud of you, darling.
Maybe it's time you found out.
Thanks, Dad. I can't believe I finally did it.
Belmont University Adult Degree Program. Finish what you started.
Welcome back to the Producer's Room, and we're joined by Anthony Smith here today. And we were just talking about your creative process in general, just working with some artists and co-writes. And I wanted to get to some of your famous #1 songs that
Sure.
everyone would know. And maybe if you can remember back to that co-write. I know you do a lot of co-writes in a week, but if you can remember back to some of these songs of what the creative process was like. So the first one I have on my list is Chris Young, Tomorrow, which was a #1.
Yeah.
Was it #1? And
It was.
CSAC, was that the CSAC?
It was his Song of the Year. Yes.
Song of the Year, wow.
Yeah, and that was great. We had, I had, met Chris and through his mom.
Yeah.
And we had offices down the hall from each other, me and his mom, and we finally,
He's
got
a tall
to
guy,
talking.
isn't he?
Yeah, we got to talking, and I didn't know Chris at all, but she, we hooked up this right,
Yeah.
and he and my friend Frank Myers, and we were, had a couple of days coming up with him, and one day we were sitting having a beer at Losers.
Yeah.
And Gary Allen's song Today was playing, and we were just teasing with each other. He goes, man, yesterday and today, there'll be a song called Tomorrow.
Right.
Just sort of laughing.
There you go.
And the next day, we sort of, was kicking this idea around, and Frank sort of had this idea about it, and we got together, and then we threw it out when Chris came in, and we just took it and ran with it. And it was interesting because there's another one of those things where you talk about this range is we were writing the song and it was coming together really well. And as we were doing the breakdown chorus, Chris had such a great range. I remember saying to him, hey man, why don't you do that? You can do that chorus, start it off low, this low octave, and go up to the high one. And so he did it.
Wow.
And he did the, and it was just great, And so we had just a great write that day. And we had already written one song prior to that. But that day, it just really hit it, just kind of got into the groove, and we did it. And the next day I was driving in, he called me up and he says, hey man, I love this song. It's got to be on my record. And that's what he said. So the funniest thing was, I remember I called him up about a week after that, and I said, hey man, I'm doing this demo session, and I want to put that song and another one we did on the session. And he says, well, I want to cut it. Why do you think we want to demo it? So I said, just so that it speaks as well as it can, and if it's in a meeting with a lot of other songs that are demoed,
Sure.
you don't have to try to defend something.
It's not a work tape. Well, that's a whole nother
Right,
thing.
it's
when
not
you
a work
talk-
tape.
Yeah.
I don't have to defend that. And he said, okay, cool, I'm in. And when we did it, I had gone to Key West, and that's when we had the flood.
Wow.
When I came back on that day, I tried to come back because I had that session on a Tuesday. And so I was supposed to get back on Sunday at 12, and I ended up not getting back until Monday at 6 because of all the flights and the delays.
Right.
But anyway, we got in and we tracked it and we did it, and it wound up, we cut it, and it got everybody excited. And they brought me, James Stroud was producing, and brought me into the studio to track it, and it tracked it just like what we did.
Sure.
All the licks, and it turned out to be a great record right down the path, which is wonderful when that happens.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that sort of, and through all the, I remember through all the stuff when I got back, and Frank was out of town. When I got back, I remember getting my car out that was left at the airport, and it was fine, and driving up Music Row to see, to the studio, which was where my office was at the same, it was actually studios downstairs from it. And, it had flooded, but they had vacuumed it out. It wasn't bad. They had, gotten it all good and everything. And so I started calling all the musicians to see if everybody could make the session. I called Chris. He was back in town. He was cool. And all the musicians, everybody could make it except for one singer. And so the session was on. We got it and we did it. And the funniest thing was, we got it done, we tracked it, got it done, but by the time we got through overtime for me to overdub all the stuff, a possum had actually gotten into the air conditioning unit outside and drowned.
Oh.
And by the second, third day in the studio, we couldn't stand the smell.
Yeah.
We didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
We thought it was some sponge or something in the floor or water or whatever. And somebody finally figured out that the smell only got worse when the air conditioner went off. We had incense and everything going on, and somebody finally went out there, took the side off, and sure enough, that's what it was.
Man.
But we wound up getting it done, and it wound up being a great record for us. But that's a process with that one.
Wow, man. Well, I would have hit another one of your number ones. I don't know if this has a possum involved or not, but What About Now by Lonestar? And the interesting thing about that, it just hits me right away. Of course, I remember that song, growing up, and it's a question, and it's like that's interesting in itself, having a hook as a question, right? Because it begs a lot of possibilities as a hook.
Well, that was an interesting one. Back to our beat story. Yeah. Because I had bought a new keyboard at the end of the year prior for tax write-offs, like you can buy this much gear. So I went and bought this gear. This guy we knew that was leaving this music store was calling all of his buddies, tell him, hey man, you can buy this keyboard. It sells for $5,000. I'm selling them for $3,900, and it'd been like, yeah, great. So I remember buying this keyboard that everybody was buying, and it had a drum machine in it. It had all these beats and all this stuff. And I had it in my office that day we were writing. I brought it in, and I'm sitting there with my buddies, Aaron and Ron, and I'm trying to get this drum thing working because I was a guy that could do that, but this was a new one. I wasn't really familiar with it. So they're sitting around, and just kind of being impatient. And Aaron, he used to smoke. He's walking in and out smoking. And I said, guys, man, you're going to love it once I get it done, but it'll be good. And they were just
button to push here.
I was just boring them to death. And after about an hour, we got this beat going. Yeah. And we started doing it, and it started just playing the keyboard to it, and then Aaron had some beginning of some lyrics that he had written down for whatever reason, and we started throwing this thing around, and went from there, man. And sign in the window, say for sale or trade, and we just went from there, and then just hit the hook on What About Now, and just kept on going. That was one of the things with the odd offbeat phrases that we thought people it'd take them a little while to get used to, but they didn't. And the funniest thing was, fast forward, there was two funny stories I'll tell you about that song. We did it, and when I did it, I went in and I demoed it, and I had this singer singing, and he was really a rock guy, really rock, and my co-writer was standing behind me there, and they kept whispering behind me, and I said, guys, you okay with this? And they just kept whispering, like, no, man, it's okay. And I said, am I pushing this too far, And they, no, man, no, but I heard them whispering back there, like, I don't know, man, And we get it done, and so Richie, the lead singer of Lonestar, we were riding with him at the time. Mm-hmm. So we were riding with him at this, and he comes into Ron's office, we were riding with him, and Ron's son asked him, he said, can I, we had Ron's son also make up a CD we want to give him when he leaves with songs we've written. He says, Dad, can I put a couple of my ideas on there? And we said, Ron said, yeah, I want him to learn how to think for himself, All
right.
So they hadn't done Amaze yet. They hadn't become that rock. So we didn't have What About Now on there. His son added it as the last song on the CD. It was the 8th song.
Wow.
We added 5 songs. His son added 3, and that was the 8th song.
Got to give him the plugger cut.
It was true. He put it on there, and I was out somewhere at a showcase that night, and Richie called me up, which I knew something was going on because he would never call me at like 9 o'clock. And he was like, hey, man, I want to cut this song. We're going to cut this song. He was so excited, And so we, really? That's the one, And then, but we didn't know they were cutting Amaze. We didn't know they were pushing, changing the way they were changing. And we get there, and he calls me up the day they're cutting, and I'm in my office, and we know they're cutting. If you're in on a project, you know when they're cutting. If you're not, you have no idea when they're cutting, Yeah. But he calls me up, and he said, we have good news, and I have good news and bad news for you. Which one do you want first? And I said, I was kidding. I said, yeah, give me the bad news. He said, well, the label found another song with About Now in the title, and so they kicked your song off and want us to cut that one. And I just sank in the chair, and I said, what's the good news, Richie? I'm trying to like you here. What's the good news? He said, well, me and the guys told him we'd rather cut yours. Do you want to come over to the studio and hear us track it? I said, I'll be right there. Ran over to the tracking room, and they tracked the song.
That's great, man. Yeah, that's great. And I love these stories. We could keep doing it, but I want to hear one more story.
Sure.
Clay Walker, and the song you did with Clay was watch
Watch
me?
this,
watch
close your
this.
eyes and watch this.
Yeah.
The funny thing about that song, it was the first time Aaron and Ron and I had written together, which we three of us wrote What About Now as well.
Yeah.
And they were playing a joke on me. They were, I'd never written with the three of them together. So they bickered all the time, playing and saying things and insulting each other to the point to where I was sitting over there at my keyboard and they were, man, I thought they were going to get into like pretty much a little fight there, you know? And they said that I was over there and I just kept getting closer and closer to the keyboard and they weren't letting me in on the fact that it was, because we've had writing appointments really tense up, you know. But the two funny things about that was we get to the end of the verse where it closes off with the title, Close Your Eyes and Watch This, and then we think it's one of those songs where you do a couple of verses and then a bridge, and somebody in the mix is hearing it as, no, man, we need a chorus, da-da-da. So we had written it one way, and then we had to go back and write a chorus and insert the chorus in it.
So where did you have the hook before? It was two verses?
End zone, close, just close your eyes and watch this.
I see what you're saying.
And it goes into that.
Yeah.
So it was just going to be where close
like
your eyes and watch this.
AABA it was, but now it's a verse chorus.
Yes. Right. And when we closed it off like that, and then we were writing where we all were on different pages. I thought it was that way. Somebody else goes, no, man, I was hearing a chorus after that. We were right. So we have to write a chorus that where the verse can end with the hook.
Yeah.
And then take off with the chorus.
Sure.
And so they went out, they took a break, and I stayed there and I worked around on this melody, and they came back and we had it. And the next day, somebody in the mix, I don't remember, I think it was Ron or Aaron, had a demo session that when we finished that night, 6 o'clock, we started at 10, walked out at 6. Somebody had a demo session. We kicked one off of that session, put this one on, and then the moment we got it done, it went on hold for George Strait and Clay Walker, who's being managed by the same person at the time, the Woolsey Company, and Clay ended up cutting it.
Wow. That's
So
cool.
that was one of those fun stories, you know, a lot of times
But
when
that
you
shows perseverance of working through it.
Yeah.
And that's what I was going to ask you too. How many times is the song finalized in the actual session versus you guys are maybe getting back together for a second time or trading ideas over email? Is it most of the time you find that it's finished in that 3-hour or 4-hour writing session, or most of the time you're going back and revisiting a few lines here and there and polishing it up?
Sometimes we revisit, but I will say most of the hits that I have had, we do them in one session.
Wow.
They tend to come together in one session. And a lot of times, like I said, that one we started at 10 and we did not walk out the door till 6.
Okay. Yeah.
So they're not always, you know, it's many of the doubles like you do now. You might do, you know, people have somewhere to go or something at 3:30 or whatever. But a lot of them, you know, like the same thing with Tomorrow, a lot of those songs, we would just start in the morning and we would just write. And we were having fun and laughing. But when we left, they were pretty much done. We didn't get back together on them. We wrote it in those sessions. A lot of them we wrote in those sessions, you know, unless you have somewhere to go.
Yeah.
But a lot of times if you're doing something, you know, with an artist or different things, you don't have it blocked out. They may be limited on time.
Sure.
But a lot of times, you know, you'll do it, and if it's going really well, I mean, you may, you know, we adjusted a line or two on that one, just an idea that I thought about like right when we were demoing it in a lyric. But you know, you really either have that high feeling, and you don't. And now the good news on the flip side of coming back to things is you tend to evaluate them a little bit more. You know, like you can come back and you hate it, but in Nashville, everybody's so busy till if you don't finish something, you either got to wait, you know, 2 months to get back together, or you may have to throw it in the afternoon because everybody's booked out 2 months or so in advance, sometimes even 3. It's gotten really crazy now. But you can come back to it and you can hear it fresh and you either really like it or you hear the problems right away.
Sure.
And the same thing is if you even finish it, you know, the next few days or so playing it down the road, you can tell if it stands up to you or sounds great or doesn't sound great, you know. So
now, is the publisher also picking it apart, or at that level, are you kind of like you standing your ground saying they're saying we need to change this line, need to change that line, or especially when there's 3 or 4 writers in the mix and they all have publishers all giving feedback? I would assume that kind of.
Well, all of these that I'm talking about, I'm not sure the publisher ever even heard them before we demoed them.
Wow.
I mean, I mean,
And they trust you guys, is what I'm saying.
yeah,
When I said you're at that level, they're
they'll
not
trust you.
They're not
and
beginning
you can,
writers.
And you can, if you have a bunch and you happen
Yeah.
to get with them and go through things.
Yeah.
But if you write one, like I said, and What About Now, I had a demo session the next day. We just decided.
Yeah.
I mean, I got three. We're all, there's 3 hit writers in the room, so
Sure.
we just went. I got a session. What do you guys think? And he goes, I vote demo. I vote demo. Said, I'm in. The end. You know what I mean? I mean, if anybody would have objected.
Right.
But it was, and then again, it wasn't, now you might consult your publisher more just because you may do fewer ones or it's a lot tougher with different things or, the monies are not there in the
Sure.
mechanical side like they
Right,
were.
right.
But by and large, I always figured, either way, win, lose, or draw by what happens with your career when you're in that deal.
Mm-hmm.
So I would rather lose with something I believed in.
Sure.
And you welcome
Sure.
their feedback on
Sure.
things, and you're with people that you trust, but they tend to trust you
Yeah.
too. I mean, at that point, at that level,
Yeah.
if you don't know how to do it by then,
Sure.
they sign you because you have a track, because you know something about what you're doing.
Exactly.
And you with other guys that are as many things to choose from as you do, and if you guys all are excited
Yeah.
about doing that, then that's a vote of confidence about what all you've done, that this rose to the top of everybody's stack.
Yeah.
And we would just generally call it,
Yeah. Well, one more question, then we're going to take it to our last break. Any song, either or, and you kind of alluded to that on when you were talking about, I think you were talking about the Clay Walker or the Lonestar, I forgot which one it was, but any song that you thought was going to be a hit that wasn't, or vice versa, any song that you didn't really think, hey, that's not a hit, but it became a huge hit. I mean, vice versa, anything in your catalog, you're like, man, this, I always thought this was a hit, but that we need.
Oh,
I know that takes a little bit of humility.
You have lots of those, man. You have
Yeah.
lots of those where they're tearing up the charts and then they lose all the steam at 22.
Right.
Or 18,
Yeah.
and you go like, what happened? With these things.
But there's
And
so many factors outside of your control. There's
you don't have
marketing.
any. You don't have any control over any things. Or I remember us having a hit with the Wilkinsons that was called "Jimmy's Got a Girlfriend." And we wrote that trying to write a song with Richie for Lonestar. But we couldn't get it off the ground that day. Nobody liked anything the other guy had going. We couldn't come in anywhere. So as a comic relief, we wrote a song, just picked up the guitar, got up the keyboard and just hit a little lick and went, Richie's Got a Girlfriend.
Yeah.
And we laughed and wrote this thing called Richie's Got a Girlfriend. We just started laughing so hard. After about 45 minutes into it, I said, guys, should we get back to doing what we were doing or keep fucking off? And I hope I can say that, but that's what I said. And they said, I vote keep goofing off. I vote keep goofing off.
Yeah.
And we finished it in about an hour and a half. And
Well, that once again, you got it done in.
we
short
finished
amount
it,
of
and it
time.
was because it was a joke.
Yeah.
But with the funniest thing, we get to the end, and Richie goes, "Man, we can't leave my name in this song. Come on, guys, we got to think of something." So we try to figure out, well, what do we put in there? Richie, Billy, that's been
Yeah.
Billy's, Johnny's, Jimmy. We hadn't heard of Jimmy, and it ended up, he played it for him when he was on the road. They ended up cutting it.
Wow.
But that's what was
You
funny.
never
like
know,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, it was funny. We did it as a joke. And then we wrote it really good, and we wrote songs, and then it just fell out because we were so frustrated from trying to get the other side over here. But you always, as a writer, I think you're going to have way more great songs from publishers too than you'll ever get recorded or that'll ever see the light of day. And some just like artists that we believe in and have things, and we don't know what happened on that one. And then some that may be an artist that you think that they are not as excited about, or for whatever reason, once it gets to the audience, to the public out there, they make the ultimate decisions and what's working and what's not. And there's something to that when they say X Factor, because we don't really know what that is, but we do know for whatever reason some people it works on that side, and sometimes it doesn't. So I've had more. You've had everybody. All of us have had more that we thought should have been than were. That's the
All
truth.
right. Well, some great stories by Anthony, and we'll be back for our last segment of the Producer's Room. We'll see you in a second. Welcome back to the Producer's Room, and this is our last segment with Anthony Smith. And our director, Mike, back there, was just asking a good question. He was asking, when you go to these award shows, and of course you won CSAC Song of the Year and some of these other awards that you've won, are you meeting any new co-writers or any new opportunities that present themselves there at some of those shows?
You generally do, just because everybody's in a festive mood and a good mood, and people that are there generally, a lot of writers are winning awards, or you have won awards, some type of achievement to be around there. And like I was telling him earlier, one of my best friends for a long time is John Rich, and I met John at a BMI Awards after getting a BMI award for the Clay Walker Close Your Eyes and Watch This. And John was in Lonestar at the time, and I didn't really know him, but he came over and he introduced himself, and he says, "Man, I think it's so great you won this award." He said, "My name is John Rich, and I'd like to write with you." And we started writing, and we've become friends and doing stuff for 16 or 17 years now, and just had the greatest time. He's been one of my best buds through all kinds of stuff. So and you just meet you meet a lot of people through those things. It's a great place to meet people because you have to be invited to most of them. You can't just go.
So they're on your level. They're your peers.
And everybody's sort of relaxed, and you're just not some guy that wandered in or something like that. And you make a lot of great connections. And I got I did a publishing deal at an award show, randomly sitting beside somebody who was running Maverick Music, Madonna's company at the time, and knew a lot of the songs that I was writing with the writer in common, that she knew the plugger from the other side, which I was actually making a deal with them. And she asked me to take a meeting with her and the president of the company that same week during CMA week, and I wound up switching and making a deal with them just by talking at another BMI dinner.
That's crazy.
It was crazy, you do a lot of stuff like that, So, yes. The answer to your question is yes. They're a great place to meet people.
All right. So the next segment we have is called Rapid Fire. It is a just more non-music type of questions, but it still informs your music. So my first question for you is, what was your favorite or least favorite school subject?
Least favorite school subject?
We're trying to get to know you as
math.
Okay, math. All right.
Yes.
But now you're using it every day to try to figure out those major seventh chords.
You do use it a lot. Thank God they made me go through it, because it does come in handy to count a lot of things.
Figuring those time signatures out.
Yeah.
Okay, this one's a little deeper. So which living person do you most admire?
Which living person do I most admire?
Yeah. It could be even someone that you know. Obviously.
Well, I'd just say probably my wife.
Wow. That's
because she's a very diligent person and much better at keeping track of things than I am. But very dedicated to a lot of things, and so kind of quiet in the background, but admire her tremendously for the stuff that she gets done.
Great. Good answer too, by the way. Give props to your wife always. I like that though. Your most memorable professional moment? If you had to pick one, maybe you don't pick one.
I was just the first time I got invited to write with Donna Summer and to go out to her house in Connecticut after I'd arrived in Manhattan, and a car took us out there, and she told us to stay with her. And I thought, people say that all the time, they don't mean it. We pull up to this big mansion. I tell the driver not to leave because all the lights are out and it's pitch black. And when I walk up there and I'm looking in, she clicks the lights on, and she's got all these people downstairs in the basement, and they were like, surprise! But they were there, but they were playing a joke on me.
Okay.
And that was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun, and we wrote, for like a week, and up there in that house in Connecticut, and going into the city at the Hit Factory and doing that. Yeah. But that was a first big time thing that I had done. That was a lot of fun with people, her and Keith Diamond, who had produced Mick Jagger and Sheena Easton and a bunch of artists on that level. It's the first time I worked with people on that level with a big budget, doing a bunch of stuff and having fun. So that was great.
Are you, I'm going off the tangent here now, but are you still tri-coastal or bi-coastal or what? Are you going out to New York once in a while? Or
I
LA?
do once in a while, and but it's more the European stuff now. Been to Sweden, been to Norway, doing stuff. And like I said, I have a writer coming in next week from London, and my friend that just left from New Orleans, he and I have traveled over there together, and we've done a lot of stuff in the dance market going over there. So a lot more of that is going on. But I'll be headed out to L.A. in about a month doing stuff. I mean, you still have some great relationships with people doing things. And the cool thing is a lot of them like to come here. Yeah. That's the other reason for having a workstation at your house, because when you ride with people out, that's how they do everything. Right. There's hardly any live, you know what I mean? Yeah. So everything works from the track, the beat up. Sure. So that's great.
So speaking of Donna Summer, I got a combo question then, because I think it leads into it. One person that you haven't written with that you would like to write with, either in Nashville or LA, New York, and then one artist that you would like to cut one of your songs that hasn't cut one so far. So combo question. I know you may need to think a minute, but
well, man, that's great.
Obviously, they'd have to be living for you to write with them. So
obviously, they'd have to be living for me to write with them. I haven't thought about it that much, you know. But Luke Laird is a great, talented guy that I would love to write with, and we've never gotten around to it, you know. And I've never had a Blake Shelton cut, and Blake is a friend of mine. I know him. There you go. And we've talked. He gives me a hard time every time I see him. But but I should get a Blake. I should get a Blake cut.
That's good. That's good. No, those are both great answers. Yeah. Okay. Now more on songs. Okay. So first of all, do you have a favorite song that you say this is my all-time favorite song, or maybe a favorite album of any type? You know.
That I've written?
No, just in general. Just like you're stuck on a desert island and you can listen to 2 or 3 or 4 songs, or you can listen to maybe a few albums. Any that you're going to pick to take with you?
Well, you know, I like a lot of the songs I've written.
That's good. You're biased.
But I will say, like, a friend of mine that was a mentor was Larry Henley. Okay. Larry was a mentor, and we wrote some of the Donna songs together. And he had won the Grammy for Wind Beneath My Wings. And I was actually with him at the Grammys when he won that year. And that's a song that I always loved. And when I met him, it was really good to have it was easy to have a friendship with him, because he had written a song that I really truly loved. And it was really easy to become friends from that. So that would definitely,
I like that.
That would definitely be one of my ones, and just about anything that Stevie Wonder's ever done would be just absolutely
is, I think, for
wonderful.
The 20th century, he was like
the Bach. He was the Beethoven, the guy, man. You know, and then you have your Diane Warrens. I mean, it just goes on and on. You know.
Okay, you were speaking about your family, and I think this is important for our viewers to really understand, is how do you balance a busy writing schedule and still keep a family or production schedule, like in your family life? I mean, do you set aside certain times on your calendar, or I mean, when you're so busy and so prolific like yourself, how do you make that balance happen?
Well, the first thing you do is start to clear out the weekends where you don't work on the weekends. You know what I mean? Unless you really just have to. Yeah. And then you have to have some evenings where you don't go to stuff, because at a certain point you realize
you can keep networking
there's stuff going on all the time, and you don't have to go to all of it. A friend of mine told me this a long time ago, was either you have to be out there or your name has to be out there. Right. And if your name's out there, it can work a lot harder than you.
I like that.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I like that.
It works 24/7 if your name will. Yeah. And you know, you just have to. It's like when you have hits or when you don't have hits. You know, in the beginning, you have a hit and you feel invincible, and then you don't have a hit and you feel like you suck. Right. And after a while, you're just in the middle, and the highs aren't as high and the lows aren't as low, and your life is sort of extracted. Your life is sort of different from the professional thing that you're doing. Right. And so you just learn that.
I think that's important, because when you're young, you're so hungry. That's like you're
and it makes a big monetary difference, you know. And I remember being on a cruise with my wife for, I forget what we were doing, but the Clay Walker song was out. And I wanted to check the number, and it was very expensive to call from this boat. Right. You know, and we were docking in like St. Thomas or something like that, and I wanted to get out, and she wanted to do something else. I wanted to get off the boat and go check out the number. And we were having a fight about it, so I decided not to do it, just like a week, you know, and it was around 19 or something like that, and it's going to do what it does, you know what I mean? But you were just excited to hear the new number, if it wasn't going to 17, especially when you're out here spending $5,000. I like to know that
like you were saying, you don't want to stick at 22.
I like to know that it didn't die and then go from 19 to 23, you know. But then you just learn that, you know, there becomes a point to where you just have to disconnect from things, and then you just and that's it. And then you get right back to it. It's not
Sure.
like it goes away,
Right,
but you just
right.
have to make yourself disconnect.
Right. Another thing I noticed, and I'm jumping around a little bit, but I think it's all important, is you're real active in the community and giving back. So I wanted to, are you still on the Nearest? Or?
No, I rolled off for the Naris
And you were at
board.
Leadership Music,
Yeah.
and you can talk more about the stuff you do. But my question was, why is giving back important to you? Because it looks like it's important for you to give back to the musical community and all that. And what does that give you?
Well, I think it's a thing that in the beginning, I never really thought about it like that, but like being on the board of the Songwriter Association, which I'm still on, I'm very
Yeah.
passionate about.
That's
And
NSAI for
NSAI.
our viewers.
Right.
Okay.
And our executive director is great, but he shames you into doing a lot of stuff in the beginning and going, just
He shall remain nameless.
Yes, yeah, Bart shall remain nameless, and you go into these things, but what they teach you is, you can never give yourself away. So
Yeah.
you really do things for organizations because in your career paths, people have helped you that you never saw it coming out of the blue. It came out of the blue.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, the person that you think will be the person that you'll turn to in a crisis or in a moment that you need help generally is not the person where the answer comes from. A lot of times, the answer will come from some other person that's just been watching you go along the whole time and can call you out of the blue and go, hey man, I hear you're looking for a deal. And you didn't think it was them. Your friend over here that you thought you might go sign with may not have a spot.
Sure.
They may be helping you, but they might not have a thing, or anything could happen. But a lot of times it's just come from people that you had no clue that they were even paying attention to you. And that to me has always been a thing that just struck me, of what would have happened along the paths if things like that had not happened.
Right.
And when you can go to places and you can talk to people, and for the ones that grasp it, and for the ones that, find their way through things, it's a fascinating, it's a great feeling that somebody found their way the same as when, I did it and found my way and all those kinds of things. So I just think that's, I think it's important for that if people want to. And then through an organization, the other thing is you can reach a lot of people at the same time.
Sure.
You can't do all this one-on-one stuff, but if you do these panels when I do them for Belmont or MTSU or Grammys in the school or whatever, you have 100 people that your 20 minutes go to versus trying to do that individually,
You're
which
reaching
you
a
don't
lot
have
more,
the time to do it.
Reaching a lot more people. And so that leads me to my next question. Obviously, you're giving these seminars that are an hour long, but for our aspiring viewers, that want to be inspiring songwriters, any few pieces of either business advice or creative advice that you could pass along, that maybe even tips that you got, wisdom that you got coming up?
Well, they have a lot more places for them to get knowledge at now.
Yeah.
Through the NSAI or through their performing rights organization,
Sure.
or all the seminars and different things. But I would just say, find somebody that you trust, or a publisher that you trust, or your PRO, and whoever you trust, and work with them and believe them what they tell you.
Sure.
Well, if you don't believe them, find somebody that you do believe.
Right.
And bring them things and keep working on those. When you find one person or one that'll take it, keep bringing them, because it's not their job to get you deals here and there if they're not a publisher. But a lot of times when we pick the phone up and tell somebody, we might just be having a conversation and they said, man, I'm kind of looking for somebody. And you said, man, this guy is great. You should check him out.
Right.
And they have things like that going all the time.
Yeah.
They're in close contact with people, and it could just be a whim that you just had lunch just yesterday with somebody who just happened to be looking, and this dude over here who's been working his tail off, that you just might say, hey man, you know what? You ought to give this guy a call.
Yeah.
And it goes from there. That's all you did. But you did know a person that seemed to be really prepared, and you did happen to go to lunch with your friend who just happened to come up with an opening.
Yeah.
And you can marry those up sometimes, and you're not in that business at all.
Yeah.
But it's just a random thing,
What about the way the business has changed? And once again, we could go on for an hour about how the business has changed, but any smart strategies business-wise, like you just said, the mechanicals aren't coming in the way they used to. So any strategies that you could or piece of advice you could give them that direction?
Well, I would say to people, if you really want to be in it, get in it and really be in it. I mean, because everybody starts their own things, and you can even have your label and everything, and have the websites of things that nobody goes to.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I would say get around it and really get in it, and really
move to a music center. I mean, do you think you would have done the same things living in Birmingham?
Never.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't actually want to move, but they told me I needed to.
Right.
And they told me if I wanted to be a trumpet player, I could move to Muscle Shoals. That's what I wanted to do. And they said, if you want to be a songwriter, you should move to Nashville.
Sure.
And I had no intention of ever staying in Nashville.
Yeah.
I was just going to come for a little bit and go on the Eastman School of Music and go and become a trumpet player. But songs got recorded, and it changed everything. But I would say, getting around a music center, if you're in college or anything, and you can go to any of these schools that can have programs to where you can intern and allow yourself to get your feet wet and to get around, really seeing how it works so that you can perfect your skill set to interact with the real business. I think that'd be a big plus for you, you know, because you never really can find that out. It's like you can learn all the music you want to, but until you actually run a session for the first time, or until you actually get in a real co-write, or until you actually pitch to a real A&R person and see that that's not what they're looking for, but see one that they do cut. I think those things hide in you in a way that you just would have no way of knowing until you were in that chair. So getting around it would be a first tip to anybody that I would say. That's
great advice from Anthony Smith. And so how can people find you, either maybe if they want to bring you in for a seminar? Do you have a website out there, or
well, the best way,
Twitter or anything like that?
They can go through, just direct them all to the Nashville Songwriter Association.
Okay, yeah, they can find you through there.
And they'll direct everybody that needs to be directed to me.
Awesome. So tell us, one more question. Tell us about maybe some of the projects to look for that you're working on now, or maybe you've worked in the last couple of years. Any artists that we should check out that...
I'm excited about the stuff we're doing with Rachel over on Curb. I'm excited about Parmley. Writing with them.
Is that out? Is that cut out yet?
It's not out, but they've cut it.
Yeah.
So they haven't released a new record yet, And other writers have been writing with Kanan Smith. Just really excited about him. And William Michael Morgan signed over to Warner Brothers.
Right.
We, write a good bit and writing next week with him. And, just a lot of the new artists that are just really exciting right now that, man, it's interesting that they love what you bring to the table and admire work you do, and you love their spirit and what they're doing, and connecting the dots to help them be the best that they can be, and them helping you with new blood is a very interesting and a very blessed thing, I would say. It's good for everybody.
Right. Cool.
So.
Well, thanks for coming to visit us at the House of David again. Maybe we'll know you'll be back in another month or two, right?
Thank you, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Guys.
I've enjoyed it.
Once again, thanks for watching The Producer's Room with our guest, Anthony Smith, and we'll see you at the next episode.